A Chinese air, missile, rocket and ground forces exercise in Xinjiang and in Tibet region opposite eastern Ladakh is being looked at very closely in India. 13 months after the standoff in Ladakh, tension simmers at the line of actual control. Though China and India pull back from the south bank of Pangong, so China is yet to withdraw from Gogra, Hot Spring and from Depsang. So are these exercises aimed at sending out a signal to India? Is China sending a not so subtle hint that it will not withdraw as it committed from other contentious issues?
Chinese Air Force fighter jets carrying out an integrated exercise opposite eastern Ladakh as the standoff enters its 13th month. Chinese missile forces and land forces are also part of the month-long drills being closely monitored by Indian forces on alert in Ladakh to prevent any other misadventure. More than 20 Chinese fighter jets are operating out of multiple air bases in Tibet and Xinjiang. Khotan, Gargunsa and Kashgar are among the airfields that have been activated for the exercise as part of a Chinese Western Theatre Command drill.
Ever since the Ladakh standoff, there has been no let-up by the Chinese as far as preparation for wars are concerned. They continue to put pressure on India throughout winter as well as post-winter. They've created extra infrastructure, brought in more missile units, brought in more air defense units, and have recently carried out a large-scale air exercise approximately 100 to 150 kilometers from the line of actual control.
The Chinese Air Force exercises are well within Chinese controlled territory, and their air defense, missile and rocket forces along with ground troops have also been roped in. China is in the process of upgrading multiple air bases and airfields, including Hoping, Linji, Khotan and Kashgar, both in Tibet and Xinjiang. At multiple airfields, runways are being extended and permanent hardened shelters being made both for aircraft and personnel.
The Chinese Air Force have been conducting aerial war games opposite eastern Ladakh. It is reported almost 2 squadrons of theirs have been conducting aerial war games. And well, it is their time for this time. They usually use it for conducting their war games, but not in the manner in which it is being seen now. Generally, they're there during the summer times, and they were never there during winters. But with the improved infrastructure of their airfields, they have brought in their squadrons to be able to fly even during winter. The Chinese are trying to build pressure and to be able to tell Indians that the advantage that they have, we will negate it with the kind of exercises that they are trying to do on the Tibetan plateau. However, all of their movements are under the watchful eye.
The Indian Armed Forces are keeping a close watch on the exercises. Indian Air Force aircraft have also been flying combat air patrols to protect the skies. China, remember, has still not withdrawn from the Gogra, Hot Springs and Depsang friction points despite multiple rounds of talks at the level of the corps commanders following the disengagement on either side of the Pangong Lake.
India and China have been engaged in a military standoff for more than a year now. The Chinese are now once again conducting both aerial and ground exercises which are being monitored closely by the Indian military. The Indian troops are on high alert as both the Air Force and Army are sure that now China cannot surprise us. This is Manjit Negi for India Today.
Now, 2 of the finest voices on matters military, both who've served extensively in this area, join me on the broadcast. My privilege to welcome Air Marshal P.S. Ahluwalia, former Air Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Western Air Command, and Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, former Chief of Staff of the Fire and Fury Corps. They join me on the show. Gentlemen, welcome on the show. I quickly want to cut across first to India Today's Executive Editor, Shiv Arur. Shiv, what more do we know about the exercise and the implication?
Gaurav, these exercises being conducted by the Chinese Air Force and missile squadrons are very, very important because the Indian Air Force, remember, has been keeping very close watch on Chinese forces in the Tibet-Xinjiang region. There have been multiple upgrades that have been happening to their high-altitude airfields, and they've been trying to negate the the advantage that the Indian Air Force has because of many more airfields in the plains. But apart from that, remember that the standoff, when it began last year, a lot of the machinery, a lot of the troops, a lot of the aircraft and equipment that actually poured into the conflict zone actually happened as a result of an exercise. So even now, China's intentions are being looked at as how they used a Western Theatre Command exercise as a kind of ruse or a cover to amplify or increase their presence in that particular area to feed the conflict zone. So it's not something that can be ignored. Obviously, the Indian Air Force is in Ladakh already in strength. They're not going to leave anything to chance. And the more important issue is, apart from the Pangong area, the banks of the famous Pangong Lake, where there were a lot of deployments on both sides and an eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation for many months, there has been a disengagement there, but very importantly in the other friction points, there has been no, forget about meaningful, there's been no disengagement or troop pullback whatsoever. So things continue to remain tense, and that's the reason why an exercise of this kind is going to be seen as provocative.
An exercise of this nature will be seen as a provocation. Now, Air Marshal Ahluwalia, China is also upgrading its airfields, extending runways, making more blast pens for fighter aircraft and permanent shelters for their soldiers. What is the big picture? What does all of this indicate, Air Marshal?
Well, let me start by actually putting you in the correct perspective. Firstly, of course, every country has a sovereign right to carry out the exercises.
Yes.
However, we have to look at this exercise in the backdrop of what happened during the last summer in the month of May and June. That is the time Galwan also happened, because they were carrying out an exercise, but they actually got much closer to the so-called line of control, and they occupied all these vantage points, just like was mentioned earlier, the Dipsang Valley, the hot springs, Sangpo, etc., etc.
Yes.
But notwithstanding that, we have to be overcautious this time, because that is the kind of game they play. They do an exercise, they come close, and then they take over the land, they take over the territory, and then we have to negotiate to get it back. So therefore, firstly, of course, we have to monitor that they do not come as per the agreement within 50 kilometers of the line of control.
Well, at this point of time, we are told that they are well within their territory. But General Kulkarni, China has not withdrawn from Gogra. China has not withdrawn from Hot Spring or Depsang. So are these exercises in some way sending out a signal to India? And if so, what's that message?
China can't be trusted. That is something that we must be very, very clear. And certain things China believes in is symbolism. They must be able to put as much pressure as they want on India, and that is what they are wanting to show. They know for sure that mirror image exists now. As regards the troops are concerned, the boots are concerned on ground, I think they are no match to India, that they are aware of, and they know their vulnerability. So all this is part of the symbolism, but notwithstanding the symbolism, I don't think a contact warfare, if at all there is, it could just be a short warfare. But what is symbolism all about? Put pressure on India, make them realize, as I keep saying, they are wanting India to become yes, they're saying a sovereign state, but they want it to be a vassal to China. They don't like India looking westward. They want India to be part of East, but subdued and subservient to China.
Okay.
In that context, you will find China will not pull back from anywhere, neither from Depsang, nor from Hot Spring, and nor from Gogra. If at all there are, it will be symbolic. And symbolism is something which plays on China's mind.
No, then the question remains, why did we withdraw? Why did we withdraw from the south bank of Pangong if we were so sure that the Chinese will not withdraw from Gogra, Hot Spring and Depsang? Because Air Marshal Ahluwalia, what's the military balance when it comes to air power, rocket power or missile power, at least in this region? Is China trying to showcase some kind of a superiority?
The effort that China is putting in this exercise is basically related to synergy between the air forces and the surface forces. That is priority one. The next, what they will be trying to establish and review their doctrines as well as their CONOPS, basically with relation to network-centric operations, just like was mentioned earlier by the earlier speaker, that they are actually following or trying to follow a philosophy of non-contact warfare. So keeping that in mind, what is important to us to assess, because it's their exercise, but it is very much important for us to assess what we can learn from them. And one of the major lessons that we should intrude into is their communication systems, their data links, and the cyber warfare capability and such, because we should use this in an offensive capacity, not only in defensive, but an offensive capacity to neutralize what they're trying to do in terms of the doctrines and CONOPS. So therefore, this will be very important for us to assess as to what is the logistics supply lines. As you are very much aware, just like Shiv is, Gaurav, that during Kargil, the most important thing, what hit them hard, was the logistics supply lines. Mantadalo, the Mashkonala. So if we were able to hit them, so we got to understand as to what will be their thrust lines. Where will they try to come in from and occupy? We have to establish what will be their logistics nodes. What will be their ingress routes for the entire logistics supply line? If we are able to monitor that, because what we should do is this so-called negativity, as far as the next is concerned, we should consider it something positive to learn and prepare for any kind of misadventure that they might get into in the future.
General Kulkarni, we agreed to withdraw. China didn't. Has China betrayed India once again? And what are effective countermeasures, if at all?
Of course they have, right from 1962 onwards. Right from Panchsheel.
Yes, General Kulkarni, if I may, Air Marshal, with your permission, just bring in General Kulkarni for a moment. General Kulkarni, they haven't withdrawn from Gogra, they haven't withdrawn from Hot Spring, and Depsang, we were just hoping they would, but we withdrew from Pangong So, or a mutual withdrawal from Pangong So, which was advantage India, but they haven't reciprocated. What does that indicate?
See, China, as I said, can't be trusted. China will always, their deceitful conduct will always be seen. Now, even let us presume that we have pulled out from the heights of Kailash and tried to give an advantage to China. Believe you me, the Chinese are not at an advantage, because even if today, since neither of us are occupying the heights of Kailash range, they know for sure that Indians have an advantage and they can occupy these heights at any point of time. But what is more important in all this is symbolism, as I keep saying again and again. The Chinese are wanting to pressurize India. They are wanting to do what they want to do in eastern Ladakh. They ensure that India behaves and tells exactly the way that they want.
Fair enough. That is what China wants. The question on my show is, what does India want and what can India do to ensure that what we want also happens? Air Marshal Ahluwalia, because this exercise appears to be some kind of a show of strength. Don't ask China to complete its withdrawal from Gogra and Hot Spring, or most important, Depsang Plains. What should India's countermeasures be that China should understand this is unacceptable to India?
Just like we did in the Sangpo and the lake, that is what we should have done. Occupied more advantageous positions where we didn't have it earlier, so that we could neutralize the effect of the areas that they have taken over. You know, you've got to hit them. You've got to hit them with a bloody nose, because that's the only way that they will learn that they cannot get away with what they wish to do with India. But we have been very soft. We have been kind to a great extent, and we have accepted a lot of nonsense from them, and that must not happen in the future. We should be well prepared. Like, for instance, it takes us time after the last exercise. It took us so much time to actually move up our troops to forward locations. I think we have learned our lesson, and this time the deployment has been throughout the winter, and we have been prepared. So we got to think of it in long term. We got to think of it in the kind of the weaponry that we need. in the kind of support, in the kind of habitation that you need to be in. In other words, we've got to be more prepared. We've got to be prepared to understand that China will do this again and again. China believes that they are the middle kingdom, and especially with the present president of China, Xi Jinping, it is very, very obvious that they want to nibble, and create friction points everywhere so that they can humiliate you, and they want to try to make you understand that you have to toe the line with China. And this is not only in terms of India, this is in terms of the entire Southeast countries.
No, in fact, that's why the world was looking up to us. And when we did a QPQ or a quid pro quo at the Kailash Ranges, the world saw how China was taken aback. But we unfortunately gave up that advantage. And General Kulkarni, what is it that India needs to do? Because this behavior is unacceptable. How does that message get across to China? Look at them. They're building permanent shelters. They're building blast pens. So they're very clear. They are there to stay in that area. Are we to do that in a much bigger way than we are even at this stage?
Definitely. We must stand firm and be capable of striking hard. There's no question of giving in at all, at any place. And the Chinese will realize very soon that India is not. It crosses the red line, they had it. That's the way to have conveyed it to China. And Chinese understand that. And Galwan was the turning point, and the Chinese know that. Troop to troop, they are at a disadvantage. And therefore, we must hold on to the advantage that we have. Never ever, Chinese are not 10 feet tall. They are vulnerable, and they know that for sure. And therefore, some of it that we have, the soft power that we have, we must exploit the soft power. We know for sure. It's not almost a non-contact warfare which would be in future. Even if there is a warfare, it will be very short. If it's a short, where do we have to gain? We have to hit China very well. Cyber is one place. Deception is another. Information is another. Laser warfare another. These are all air is another. These are the places where Chinese must feel that yes, they're hurt. Economic, all kinds. Every Indian must realize that he has to stand up to China.
That's a very good point you make, General, and I will let that be the last word. It's not just the armed forces, but every Indian needs to stand up, see the face, and realize the nature of the adversary, and then respond. As always, Air Marshal Ahluwalia and General Kulkarni, many thanks.